I'll just leave that scene up briefly so that anyone watching the recording can also briefly imagine that they're there and imagine the smells and the sounds. Perhaps take a deep breath. But then we're going to move on. And we're also, Tom, if you were at one of Tom's sessions on VVox, you'll be familiar already, but we're going to help demonstrate again for him to using VVox. So if you can go to vvox.app, so it can just be done in a browser, can it as well? Tom, or you're muted?
Yes, yeah, no, it's basically a website link. So vvox.app. Don't put any W's in. It is just vvox.app. You can do it on your mobile device, so you don't have to have too many screens open. Or you can, as Denise mentioned, just use another internet tab and have it to the side, and it will work just as well on either. So
I've not actually used VVox before, so Tom was helping me earlier today just get that connected into the PowerPoint. I've used Mentimeter, so maybe some of you might be familiar with that. And it's a way that we can collect your input in a different form. So obviously there's the chat that we can use as we go. So thanks, yeah. The link's been posted in the chat, I see. If you can just go to VVox and plug in that ID, then we'll go on to some questions just to get us started, a bit of conversation started in a different way. So is that enough time, do you think, Tom, to carry on and get, yeah, okay. So this question is hopefully coming up in your VVox window or on your phone, if that's where you doing it.
So press enter again to start the poll.
I do.
Yeah, you said yes, that's it. So press enter and the poll opens, and then it will.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh, that's it. Perfect.
Okay. So for some reason it's got a picture of me in the way there. Take that out the way. So if you can, it looks like there's things being entered, Tom, but it's not coming up on the screen.
No, it's not a live one. What will happen is when you close it, it will then display the words on the screen.
Okay, so we're waiting for people to enter their.
Yeah, so we'll let everyone that wants to enter their words,
Okay.
and then when you press enter again, it will display them on screen.
So it's obviously asking short answers of you. It's going to be a word cloud that comes up. I think there are ways to use VVox, like with Menti, just putting in short text as well, but that's harder to plug into PowerPoint. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah. Yes, if you use the native VVox presentation, you can do answer text. You can plug it into here, but it won't display through PowerPoint at the moment. But again, they are always changing features, and if it's something that we really want, we can request it of them.
Okay. I just noticed that there's a sort of shadow from my, oh, there we go. Okay. Well, that's interesting. It's done it in a sort of it doesn't censor it. So yes, isolation, not engaging, not responding, fear, change, managing anxiety, disengagement. So yes, lots and lots about the connection. One way or another, you've used words that are talking about whether students are going to connect or not. The difficulty of monitoring what's going on. And I see there's someone said risk as well. So we're going to be talking a bit about some of these things as they come up. So yeah, facilities is there as well. I guess people's, I wonder what they're connected to. It's yeah, tricky just having it in a word cloud rather than in text. So thank you. That's helpful. this one isn't in Vivox, so we can do the old-fashioned way of, you can speak up and say something, or feel free to type it in the chat if you prefer. And I guess you've already been answering that to some extent in what you said in the first question. I'm actually not seeing the chat at the moment.
So Tanya said, my postgrads have coped very well. Jim says variable. Anne says motivation dip. Claire says, I think it depends on the student. Some will be fine, some will struggle. Level 4 are the most concerning.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. That it's variable, and I suppose, like all of us, there's been advantages, and some people will perhaps have found it easier to do the juggle. I wonder if that is relevant for the postgraduate students, that like many of us, so there's some aspects to working from home which actually make life a lot easier, as well as the things that are more difficult. But yeah, it's the connection and how to engage students with the learning, isn't it, that we're going to be thinking about. So here comes another VVOX to fill in. And this is the last one.
Press it to start again.
Okay, there we go. So this is your feelings, the impact on you of the role of, you know, having on you and your role of dealing with student wellbeing and mental health. And oh, I can see some people are using the chat, so yes, you can do that as well, or you can use VVOX.
If you want to open the chat window for yourself, Denise, if you move your mouse to the top of the screen, you'll get a drop down, and on that drop down, it'll say chat. If you click that, it'll open up a separate chat window.
Okay. I'm not finding that, Tom. It's partly because I've also got my presenter view open and several other things. So maybe it's just one thing too many.
So from where we got to, Lee says his level 4s have been a mixture of mostly engaged, but those who are struggling dropped off the radar. Richard said his level 4 coped badly with the move to online, but level 5 and 6 have been stronger. Frank says isolation has been a problem, more a mental health than an academic issue. Gina says it does depend on the personal circumstances, for example, that people's different home lives. And Zoe's put, we are expecting a rise in the amount of mental health support we will need to offer, and what they will offer as well. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So if I want to display the results of this,
hit enter again, and it closes it, and it will put it all back for you. And again, it's not closed it yet. You need maybe click on the PowerPoint itself. I had a problem with this morning with the.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah.
It's... Okay. Again, it's done a slightly funny thing of putting it further down the screen, hasn't it? But anyway.
This I'll jumping very quickly. This what doesn't seem to normally happen. I think it's you've used the UOP master slide template, and that doesn't work very well. The ones I've done today, just using a PowerPoint template, put it square and center in the middle.
Okay.
I will look into that for those using the UOP template going forward. But I'll pass back to you. Sorry, Denise.
Okay, no, that's fine, because we wanted to demonstrate this as well. But yeah, thank you. Oh no's, I like that one. Uncertain, worried, anxious, unprepared, fraught, cautious, adrift. So there's lots and lots of difficult feelings, sense of it being a minefield. But we do also have the empathetic, so empathetic to the students and wanting to support them. But yeah, also tired. Oh, sorry, there's caring I see there, but overwhelmed, tired, that kind of thing seems to, sort of unequipped and unprepared and anxious and worried seems to be more there than the caring and empathetic and so on, but those are in there as well. And that's the picture I get every time I ask this question about student mental health. And I think now we've just got this added layer of concern about how to manage, again, like with all aspects of the role, there's this extra dimension to what we're being asked to do and how we're going to fulfill our roles. This is some research that came out some time ago. Sorry, Frank, I started to see what you saw and then couldn't see it again. So perhaps you can just keep a running commentary every now and then, Tom. I'll stop in a minute. These findings was a sort of national piece of research with academics about the rise in, so I think it was a few years ago now, the rise in student mental health difficulties and the impact on academics of that. And it's really interesting that there's substantive negative impact on the well-being of academics. And although dealing with mental health difficulties is now an inevitable part of the academic role, many academics don't feel that they're the necessary structures and cultures to support them. And the recommendations are that universities need to recognize this and create spaces for discussion and ongoing support and accessible training. And in my role as head of wellbeing, I'm very committed to that and very much wanting to develop a whole institution approach, which isn't just focused on students and what we're teaching students and helping students with, but also on providing a support, structured support, useful support to academics and anyone else in the university in their role in supporting students, so that we're there, joining up the support and making sure that people aren't being asked to do things that shouldn't be in their remit, and that they're being properly supported in things that do fall into their remit. And some of that is about structured engagement, regular content, and a shared contact and a shared sense of purpose. And we're starting to do not just the consultation, which I'll talk about in more detail when you've got a specific student that you're concerned about, but also more regular opportunities to discuss and reflect and think about issues and students more regularly. And I'll tell you more about some of those projects in a minute as well. And some of today's talk is about clarifying responsibilities and ways that you can do that with students as well. So just to, I'm sure, sorry, you want to say?
Do you want some of the comments? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
So Tanya put, Google Meet has worked well to hold personal tutorials. I managed to keep in touch with my students all over Europe. Frank put, the problems are not the students who engage in meetings, but the ones who don't respond to any means of contact. And Rich asks the question, if we are a research-led university, can we reasonably expect those focused on research to also have these skills, time and natural empathy, to be able to support students with their lives?
I think that's a very interesting question and debate. I don't think I've got an answer to that one. If you're a research-led, if you're in a research-focused role, are you also likely to be a personal tutor, or not?
I will let you know when. Yes, Rich says yes, that's possible.
Right. Okay. Well, there's a lot. The sort of sector guidance now is very much about whole institution approaches, about mental health and well-being being something that's being taken seriously across the piece, not just for students, but for everybody, and probably for everybody to feel like they're learning more about how to support both their own and other people's well-being and mental health, not becoming specialists, not having to go and learn, lists of diagnoses and things like that. I'm not a believer in that at all. I'm much more about people feeling like they are they're able to be caring and supportive in their own roles and know how to then get additional help for students and help students make use of networks of support, rather than that the tutors or the academic staff need to be the be all and end all. But going back to one of the other comments, of course, one of the challenges is actually getting students to engage with support, and but trying to do that in a joined up way, in a collaborative way with, across the roles in the university is one of the things that can work well to do that. The slide's just a reminder, I'm sure many of you know, but that students can access the student wellbeing service in a variety of ways. But one of the things that's really useful to know and to be able to do with a student, if you've got a student with you, and by with you I mean kind of on the other end of the Google Meet as well as in the room, is to get them to download the WhatsApp app, and that puts them in touch with us in an informal way at the Student Wellbeing Service. They are anonymous, so it's that kind of step that's not the same as them actually registering with the service. Of course, you can encourage them to do that as well, but the WhatsApp app is a useful way for them to be able to, once they've downloaded it and registered, then they can be in text-based communication with us during office hours. And it's just worth knowing that students can have that immediate, it's not necessarily absolutely immediate, but same day interaction, and get support in an informal way if you're worried about them having to wait or that kind of thing. So just reminding you about that we offer, and that they can they can message us to get to also to escalate and to get other support as well. So it's sort of another way through, as well as the official kind of registering with us. And then our staff consultation service. So again, I hope you know about this already, but just to remind you that we've got a system whereby one of the senior team in the wellbeing service, so experienced mental health professionals, is on duty every day and is able to respond. We aim to respond on the same day to an email, or to try to call you back if we can get numbers for that, to talk through any concerns that you have, and to take information about students, to advise what we'll do, what we can do in response. We won't share information straight away, but if we do have consent to share, which we actively seek from students, then we can also work in collaboration with you and help you know what else you can do, or also just know that you've done what you can and don't need to worry anymore. And we're really wanting to sort of keep building on that, as I was saying earlier, in terms of offering that support to academic staff. So hopefully that goes somewhere towards the question about the expectations, that there's professional expertise there to consult and to talk things through if you're unsure about things. Do you want to add anything about the chat, Tom?
Yes, there's two coming here. Frank says, I've had comments from students with mental health issues that waiting time for the wellbeing service was long and they did not find the support very useful. It's difficult for me as a tutor to deal with such comments. Any advice? And following that, Catherine's put, I've also had feedback that students find waiting times at wellbeing are too long and feel that it is not accessible to them as the service is too busy. There's a couple of other comments I'll get to in a second, but they kind of link together.
Well, this part before lockdown, we absolutely we were, for the first time in a while, we really were. There were people waiting too long, and that is just the case. But nevertheless, if they were using the WhatsApp app, so text-based support, they could get it on the same day, and we were doing as much as we could to make bookable same-day appointments available to students so that they could access things immediately. We are now just about to close the deal on the university investing in an extension to the service, which will involve telephone counselling from an external provider in a number of languages. So going back to if anyone was in the previous conversation about students' English ability, that certainly affects their ability to make use of support when they're very distressed. You know, if you're not talking in your first language when you're distressed and anxious, then that it's hard to make use of support. It is hard to respond to general things about this, the support not being useful. I think that, yeah, obviously it's not always going to fix everything and sort out the problem. It's not necessarily going to meet everyone's expectations if they're hoping for sometimes unrealistic. There's quite a lot of focus on putting the onus back on students to do things, to act, to take steps to help themselves, and sometimes that's not popular. However, if it's a genuine thing where something's been actively unhelpful, or where someone feels a particular practitioner has been helpful, we're totally fine about people just saying, can I see someone else? Or, so what I would do is encourage you to ask them to try again, and to keep coming. And I'm hoping that with this additional capacity, we'll be able to offer more and sort of longer episodes of contact. But we never just say, oh, well, that's all you're getting to students. But what we do is put the ball back in their court so that they need to make contact again if they want to book another appointment, rather than just sort of booking a whole series of appointments which they say yes to and then don't turn up to. So we are asking sort of their active engagement with the support, rather than just weekly sessions booked for them, which they may or may not turn up to, which is a problem we had in the past.
Just before you move to your next slide, sorry about this, Denise. There's a couple in here saying that the counselling service has been very successful for their students, both online and face to face, but it does take a while to get into the system. There's talk of the UOP chaplaincy being available throughout the year, and they've been great. Tanya asks how do we encourage more students to engage with that? But I think the question I'd pick up here is from Rich, which says the WhatsApp app looks really cool. If students don't have a mobile phone or have a tablet computer that only does Wi-Fi, how can they use it somehow? It requires a phone number to register. So if they haven't got a phone, or they've only got a tablet, but you need a phone number, how do they? Is there a way around that?
We've been working with them for a while to get them to make a web-based access. It isn't currently accessible web-based, so that is an issue. So yeah, I'm afraid that is a lack that's there. We are with everything, the way that things have changed. There certainly hasn't been since lockdown any issue with access. People do not have to wait. They get almost same day, next day appointments, and we're hoping that the way that we can reorganize and use some of this extended support will help us do that, and make sure that we are actually seeing students quickly when they first contact us. And so it's not only the WhatsApp app, it's also the same day bookable sessions that they can ring up and say, I'd like to speak to someone today, and we've got, that's how the system works. I'll press on because I've got more things to tell you, and we can come back round to those kinds of questions if you have further questions around student access. What I was wanting to talk about is thinking about your one-to-ones with students, and just bearing in mind some of the things that we think about when we're setting up counselling sessions, or confidential mental health support sessions with students. Just thinking about how you can recreate what you would do when you're going to see someone face to face, to give them that sense of the sort of safety and privacy. And this is one of the things. So we've already looked at students have got very variable equipment and access, and that's something important. So we, needing to be flexible in terms of the methods that you offer them, and having backup plans for technology failures and things like that. Being very aware that students might be wary. So when you're concerned about a student, when you want to kind of check in with them, the phone might feel more sort of safe and private to them, but you gain something by actually being able to see them. But we know that quite often they're not very happy with that. And of course, you should never be sort of insisting on that. It's better to just have the contact and have them engage. But suggesting something like using a virtual backdrop might address some people's issues if they, if they're concerned about kind of bringing you into their bedroom, and being aware of that kind of thing, that this space actually it exists in somebody's personal space, and that's they're inviting you into the personal space, and that might be fine if it's sort of general learning topics. But if it's a one-to-one personal tutor session, or if you're wanting to follow up on something to do with well-being or mental health, you might want to just take that bit of extra care to check in with them about whether it feels private enough for them, and just sort of put a bit of effort into creating the walls and the door and the chairs and the things that would just be there, that help to create what feels like an appropriate space for that kind of conversation when you're in a building. And by, even if it is okay, by voicing that and saying that, so you have to use the conversation to create the space rather than the walls and the door. And also this idea about the entry and the exit. If you think about it, when someone comes to a meeting, to an appointment, they kind of start wherever they are, and they travel through space, and then they come to where you are. And that's also sort of psychological space, then sort of on the way to that meeting, and knowing that that's what's coming up. Quite often with all of our online meetings, we're in one space or we're somewhere, and then suddenly we're in this other space. So verbally kind of just talking through some of the things, like how long you've got, whether it's private enough, all that kind of thing. Just having that conversation again, even if it's okay, just helps to create a sort of arrival point for the student. And similarly, when you know the time's coming to the end, if you just kind of give a little bit of buffer time to draw things to a close, just give them a moment to sort of take a breath and maybe talk about what are they going to do next and so on, so that they're mentally kind of stepping away and moving away from the meeting is sort of straight back into life. So those are just some of the sort of techniques and things that we think about. And this thing about being really clear about the start and end of a meeting, it's even more important in an online or a phone meeting to try and stick to that. And sometimes people really use that, so if they know they've got something difficult to talk about, they might wait till 5 minutes before the end, because then that's as long as they think they're going to be able to bear to kind of talk about something difficult. So it sometimes feels like you're doing them a favor by carrying on and staying on, and actually they might have not wanted that. And perhaps a little bit of flexibility if someone's in a lot of distress, just to help them to sort of gather themselves. But it might be better to stick to the clarity of what you said you do, so that it's clear that that you're kind of transparent in how things will work, but then agree to follow up later or something like that instead. And that also gives you the opportunity to then consult or think about what else to do and that kind of thing. So don't feel like you're sort of just stuck there with a student just because they're in distress. And then just some other tips about actually raising concerns, using open rather than closed questions. So how are things going? What's going well? What's not going so well? So sort of naming inviting that kind of expansion of what's going on for them. Are you okay? People will go, yeah, I'm fine. You know, that's the sort of easy way out of the question, and you're wanting to try and open up and just hear a bit more. And if you're wanting to address something difficult, just saying what you've noticed or what you're concerned about as the reason for what you're going to say next. So this, I've noticed this, or I've seen that, and I just wanted to see if there's anything I can help with. So rather than the kind of, why haven't you been here, or what's going on, or that sort of puts the student on the spot. So it's hard to argue with you saying, I've noticed this, or I'm concerned about that, and it's a good intro. And being really transparent, if you are concerned, saying so, that's a really good introduction. And actually asking the student to say, so if you say, I'm concerned, perhaps say what some of the reasons were, the things that have raised concern, and then ask them themselves, are you concerned? And sometimes that then gives permission for them to say, actually, yeah, I'm not, I'm not okay. It doesn't mean you have to then sort of diagnose or whatever, that by asking the student to say kind of something about whether they're concerned, it sort of helps put you on the same page. And then just also being clear, if you think that it's useful for you to pass on some concerns or to talk about it with us, telling the student you're going to do that. And often, if you're wanting us to proactively do something, we will, we will say to the student, the reason we've done so is because your tutor's contacted us, or whatever. So just that transparency really helps, and helps that sort of collaborative joining things up. So yeah, is there, if we want to pause there, is there anything that anyone's wanting to raise or say? Feel free to say it, or put it in the chat.
Nothing at the moment in the chat. There was one I missed from before where John mentions consent is a huge issue now, especially involving parents. But there's nothing new since the last section. So if anyone has any questions for Denise, please put them in now.
Just on the parent issue, our consultation service is also for parents. So if you have parents contacting you and they're worried and so on, that's something you can also suggest they do, is speak to us, and we will talk things through and support parents as they, in their concerns. Again, obviously, just like you, we can't tell them about their son or daughter, but we can help explain how the service works. We can tell them what kinds of things they can do. We can certainly say, if concerns are raised and someone says they think a proactive call would be useful, we can act on that, but we would always say why and who'd raised the concern. And so, we just use that kind of language, so we're not kind of confirming or denying anything about the student themselves, but we're still being helpful.
So a few comments in. Andre said the importance of not using why could not be emphasized enough. So it's a statement rather than the question, but yeah, exactly that. And then Lee asks, do you think an opt-out clause for students having their parents informed in case of a crisis would be helpful, like Bristol University do? And John says, that's good to know. Parents have contacted him and students haven't wanted to speak to them.
Yeah. The whole Bristol opt-in thing, there's been a whole task group last year all about that. In Portsmouth, we already asked the student for a contact, and they choose who that contact is. Obviously, in many cases, a parent is the last person that should be contacted. There's so many different circumstances, we need to remain aware of that. So the student chooses who that contact person is. And we're probably moving away from calling it an emergency contact, but a sort of your chosen contact, or chosen support is probably what it's going to be called in the coming year. But what we are about is, and this is increasingly, I'll tell you about this as I talk about the Learning Well resources, is getting students to be much more proactive in making use of support networks themselves. And we at the Wellbeing Service, we're actively encouraging students to speak to their tutors, speak to their course leaders, speak to their parents, speak to the people who can be of help to them when things are difficult. And they're often very, very reluctant, and sometimes that's for good reason. And I think putting the emphasis on them being more proactive and seeing support networks as something that are a basic utility, they're part of belonging at the university, part of what's going to help them be successful in their learning. This is what the Learning Well resources focus on. And then, you know, you're not just waiting for when there's a significant concern to start having a conversation like that with students. You're encouraging them to have those kind of networks in place. And then, yeah, we do already think about and talk about contacting parents, but that shouldn't be a decision made, and you know, it isn't the policy for that decision to be made away from kind of assessment of assessment with professional mental health expertise and input. So we regularly are making those decisions, and through the consultation service, if that's something you think is relevant, then by all means contact us, and you know, we can have that sort of joined up conversation about whether that seems like the appropriate thing to do with that student. Are there other things to respond to, Tom, or can I move on? Yeah.
Nothing at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Denise.
So just going back to all those, you know, what you entered on that word cloud about the impact on you and some of the feelings that you experience. Just wanting to acknowledge that and that research that we looked at briefly. And I'm wanting to do a plug for the Wellbeing in Difficult Times survey, which is also a kind of a wellbeing reflection tool, which is out at the moment. It was in the staff news update this week. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes, so it's taking some time and helping you think about your own well-being. You get to go in for a prize draw for Amazon vouchers up to £100, so hopefully there's a bit of an incentive there, but also it sort of points in the direction of a variety of resources, including the ones that are highlighted in that staff news article about Silver Cloud, some new wellbeing, some online courses that are available. We've got for students, but are also available to staff. So yeah, we'd really like, so this is research that I'm running with a small team to parallel something we're doing with students as well, and we're wanting to use it to develop this as a tool for wellbeing reflection, but also for evaluating interventions and things that are there to support staff, including things like the Silver Cloud resources, and the Supporting Staff, Supporting Students project, which I started to reference earlier, where we're getting course teams to come together and to have regular reflection, but you know, starting on thinking about how they can be there to support each other and talk through concerns and feel like students and student difficulties can be managed collaboratively, rather than that individual tutors feel quite sort of isolated in supporting their own students, and us bringing the sort of expertise and consultation expertise to some of those conversations to get that rolling. So there's things that I think can make a real difference to the impact on staff of student mental health difficulties, but it does also start with just being more aware of your own well-being and what you can do. And, you know, I think this is a really, really big question for all of us at the moment. I know that a lot of us are really tired, really have been working very hard, needing a rest. And here we all are at this festival, busy learning about all sorts of new things that we're going to have to go and do. Just recognizing and the need to pause and take a breath with that. And I'm not going to try and show the Learning Well animation, but I hope you will do that. It was there was a link in the description of the session to the MyPort pages where, no, actually to the website about blended learning, where you can find the animation. But also if you go to the Student Wellbeing Service MyPort pages, there's an animation there called Emotion Regulation for Learning, and that's the sort of basis. It's a conceptual model, a way of thinking about emotions and how emotions link with thinking and learning, and being able to regulate emotions is really important for productive learning and work, and understanding that and understanding how to self-care and have your soothing system online is a really important thing for staff as well as for students. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at that. But I'm mainly focusing now on talking about the Learning Well resources, which unpack that that animation, that conceptual model and approach to help students think about how they can map their own personal resources, have in place the things that help them manage the anxiety and the stress that comes with facing uncertainty and not knowing. So all of us will have a threat response to just the basic uncertainty of not knowing and still having to learn new things. And then, of course, when you're new to a city, new to higher education learning, new to a country, speaking a different language, there's all sorts of additional things in the transition which will get that threat response going. And so it's really focusing on helping students understand that and normalizing those feelings and looking at all the practical things that they can do to support themselves with that in the transition. So the transition module is focusing on managing those transitions, and then the Learning Well approach takes the well-known 5 ways to well-being and connects it with the Portsmouth Student Charter, and so it's also a basis for thinking about inclusion. So people who were in the previous discussion, I started to talk about that to some extent, and then that's something that you can build on. So all of these resources are being built and brought together. It's kind of a fast forward of a pilot project that would potentially have been aiming to be ready by the end of this next academic year, and we're just doing, pulling out all the stops to get it ready so that it's there for you to be able to pull things in as part of your blended learning that you're going to be putting together. It's pulling together projects that have been developing and working with students and co-created to where they are now. The Welcome Ambassador scheme has moved from being a kind of a peer support scheme to a pledge, and Hayley Turner McIntyre, who's this, she's just started a second year as a sabbatical officer, and she's the welfare officer. She's got as one of her things she wants to really promote and achieve is that we aim to have every student making the Welcome Ambassador pledge, which is essentially pledging to uphold the student charter and to be a role model in the way that that they do that. So please do go and have a look at the website for the principles of blended learning, because it sets out more about the Learning Well courses and what they will look like. The key activity that goes with the transition course is for students to map their resources and to have personalizable documents that so they've got the name, they put the name and contact details of their personal tutor, and then also just thinking about all the other resources that are available to them and helping them really engage with that. And we're planning a sort of warming up into the induction period that that will be online and available to students in September as they start to join campus in this sort of more staggered way that's going to happen this year, using the welcome ambassadors. And the really key thing to think about is that this module is going to be there and used to the returning students as well. And we're going to be incentivizing them to do the module and the few extra bits of activities which will allow them to make the welcome ambassador pledge, and then to be offering activities and opportunities to connect on a variety of issues and interests for the new students and for each other. So very much about building community and helping students connect. And then that's leading into the programs that the UOP Global and UPSU are developing for weeks beginning the 26th of September and the 5th of October, that then feed into all of your induction activity as well. And all those resources will be in Moodle. There'll be things like the slide I started with, helping to just ground and soothe, take a breath before you start a teaching session. So just little ways that you can build in some of this emotional literacy into the way that you teach, but also activities and things that you can do in small groups in a more intentional way, bringing groups together, helping students practice the kinds of skills that help them connect with each other, develop equality and diversity competence, abilities, things like conflict resolution, and basic peer support skills. I haven't written down there, but it's also included there. That serves as a foundation for co-creation activity, for helping students get involved in things like decolonizing the curriculum and the kinds of things that you're going to be wanting to look at to address attainment gaps, which is obviously high on the agenda, alongside all of just the hopefully really helping you build community in this very different way that you're going to be delivering your teaching. So I think that's my last slide. Yes, I'm happy to just open up for the last little bit discussion and questions. I'll stop sharing the screen. How do I do that then? I stop sharing. Okay.
You should now be able to see chat as well.
Yes, indeed. Do we work in tandem with the UPSU? So the Advice Centre at the Students' Union focuses on supporting students with processes. So yes, the short answer is yes, and what they do complements what we do. And we have been doing quite a lot of joint thinking about how to better support students where there's conflict, where there's where relationships have broken down. That the Students' Union hosts the Sorted Out service, which is the conflict resolution service run by students, but supported by Paulson's mediation service. And so, yes, we do. I'm not sure in what context you were wanting to ask that question, but yeah, we do work together and cross-refer. Just trying to open the chat. Okay. Just to clarify about, so these learning well resources that I've been talking about, at the moment you can see the animation and you can see a description of the sort of student leadership pathway. on the Student Wellbeing Service pages in MyPort. If you haven't seen MyPort recently, that's been there since just before lockdown. Some really, before, when MyPort was just the knowledge base, it was much harder to find information about the wellbeing service and about all the other services. And now there's some really good pages in MyPort. So do go and have a look at our pages. And those, I think that a lot of people have expressed the relief that we also feel that there's now, a clearer sort of shop window for how to get in touch with us and all the different things that we offer. And hopefully we will be more accessible than we could be. We did have, in the last 3 years, we have more than doubled the number of students seeking support, and that was starting from a high base. So we've been working really, really hard to maintain a really good quality service, but in February and sort of mid-February into mid-March, it did just get so that it was pretty clogged up. So that's the question. This at departmental level. So there will be a Moodle kind of hub page, and the resources will be there, and you can bring some of those resources across. We're going to have it so that the resources are available for you to put across into one of your weeks. I guess with tutoring, you might just want to send students to one of the sections in the hub, and then you can do activities and some of the suggested activities in the sessions. I mean, Claire, this is essentially resilience training for students. If you have a look at what this model is about, it's about being able to develop the strategies that help to manage difficult feelings like anxiety and stress, and have strategies that make use of support, make good use of self-care, knowing how to do that in order to then be able to work effectively, and to sort of have the grit and the perseverance and the growth mindsets and so on. So it's about developing those mindsets that are effectively creating resilience. Resilience is one of those difficult words that students sometimes resent. They resent it being something that they're expected to, that you can throw anything at them and they just have to be resilient. So sometimes just I'm careful in my use of that word just because of some of that baggage. But I think one of the key messages to students is that support isn't a deficit thing. It isn't for only if you've got a problem. Creating support networks, links, making use of all the resources available to you is a smart move. It's the way to do better in your learning. And I think especially for students where there's potentially sort of less confidence in their sense of belonging, that sort of implicit stereotype threat, that idea that if I show that I need support, that shows that I don't really belong. And by putting this message out to all students, that making use of support as resources, these are resources that are part of what's there to help people succeed, help everyone succeed, to fulfill the potential, all that message that's there in how we talk about things in the strategy and so on. That helps to break some of those outmoded ideas out. You have a whole course on resilience. I think it is important. It is a good word. It's just one that I'm aware that sometimes gets the hackles up. I'm not saying never to use the word resilience. Yeah, and teachers absolutely need resilience. My goodness. Yeah. Destigmatizing, Catherine, absolutely. So it looks like we're almost out of time. If anyone else wants to give a last comment or question, feel free. But thanks very much for being here. And I'll keep everyone posted about the learning resources. Please go and do the please go and do the wellbeing survey. We need more staff to do it, and it's a good way to just assess where you are yourself, and also look from the inside at some of this stuff. So I think someone said earlier about kind of how are we expected to do this. Well, practicing it on yourself is a good starting point. Yeah.
A lot of nice thank yous there in the comments. So thank you very much, Denise, for a very informative session.
It's a
If there are
pleasure.
no other questions, I will stop the recording.